The other factor is debt is actually money in the money game. Without debt, without there being debt, there would be very little money in the entire system, and the system would grind to a halt because it's designed upon debt. What does this really mean? Well, about 98% of all money, and there's different forms of money. We won't go into those right now, but let's just talk, say money, credit, bank credit. So about 98% of all that money, all the credit, all the, money in banks, etc., in existence today has come into its existence via a debt contract. And that debt contract could be a loan, it could be a credit card, or it could be a mortgage. So in short, when somebody, when an individual or a business signs a debt contract, the signature on that debt contract provides the authority to the bank or the financial institution to create that credit, which becomes debt for the borrowing party, and credit, an asset, for the lender. And I touched on this in the first MFE strategy program a year or so ago. I pointed to the Bank of England quarterly bulletin in 2014, and that was Q1, and it was entitled Money Creation in the Modern Economy. Because a lot of people can't believe that, banks actually create the money in circulation, and they create upwards to 98% of the entire money supply through debt contracts. But this is firmly supported and evidenced by a number of, notable institutions, notable professors, and I'll just briefly go through. In the Bank of England quarterly bulletin, you'd think the Bank of England is quite a high level institution, right? So remember in the first part one game, it's a very high level player in the money game. So in that particular quarterly bulletin, page 2, paragraph 3, lines 3 to 5, it says this: one common misconception. Aha, misconception. Money myth, right? One money myth. Let's change that from misconception. Let's say money myth. Let's be truthful about this. Is that banks act simply as intermediaries, i.e., lending out the deposits that savers place with them. Right. So what does that really mean? Well, there's a common held belief that banks only lend out the deposits of other people. And what we've basically heard here, the Bank of England basically said that's actually not true. And then they go further in saying page 3, paragraph 1, lines 1 to 7. Commercial banks create money. Don't think you can get any more clearer than that, right? Commercial banks create money when a bank makes a loan, for example, to someone taking out a mortgage. It does not typically do so by giving them thousands of pounds worth of banknotes or coins. Instead, the bank credits, i.e., type numbers into their bank account with a bank deposit of the size equal to the mortgage. At that very moment, new money is created. So here we have the Bank of England, notable institution, high level player in the money game, basically stating that banks create the money into existence through debt. Debt for the borrower is a liability. Debt to the lender is credit and an asset, and it is a fantastic, productive asset. Then we have Professor Richard Werner. Now, some of you might know that he is our guest mentor here. Back in 2014, he actually wrote an academic paper entitled "Can Banks Individually Create Money Out of Nothing? The Theories and the Empirical Evidence." And that was September 2014. And that was a very interesting paper. I was working closely with him at the time when he wrote that paper. And we exchanged lots of information, and I exchanged some information and evidence from some of my cases. And it was a very interesting time. He had a case where, when you read the paper, it's fantastic. It's high level, but it's very interesting. His conclusion was that that yes, banks do actually create credit. They create the money supply from a debt contract, and he explains the empirical evidence and how the empirical evidence shows that in his paper. It's really interesting.